Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I'm going to send you all to church this morning. I think maybe that's where God may have led you this morning. Maybe with some absolute certainty I can say that this morning, since, surprise, that's where you all ended up here this morning. This morning's African American spiritual, Children, Go Where I Send Thee, is a typical spiritual and one that's beloved during Christmas because it reminds us of all the characters in the Bible. It's a action song. It's a song filled with movement. It's a call and response song, which are some of the things that we've lifted up in the previous Sundays here in Advent. This one, Children, Go Where I Send Thee, is also a columnative song in which, like the 12 days of Christmas, it's a song that we sing, and then with each verse we add a new verse, and then sing all the other verses before it until we get to those, to the totality of the song. It's a fun reminder and an easy song to sing for children, which is why some of us may have a memory of singing it during Sunday school when we were growing up and learning about Jesus and the Bible. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
We're going to send you to places that are sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes places where you would not rather go, sometimes places you would not rather be, sometimes places that are filled with pain and brokenness. As a child, I loved going to church because it was the one place I knew I could go where I would be loved and cared for. It was a place that I knew the community would support me no matter who I was and what I was experiencing in my life. Often the people in church didn't know the full extent of what I was going through. There are reasons for that. I didn't always share my personal life with the people in the pews next to me, even when I was encouraged to during youth group or Sunday school. But still there was always conflict brewing up at home. There was always something I was struggling with. Stuff that I think we can all resonate with, trouble at school, or trying to make sure that we were getting good grades, making friends, trying to figure out who's your real friend and who may be someone that you meet along the way that helps you learn a little bit more about friendship. Who are the friends that you need to let go of and move on in life? As a middle schooler, though, I ran into some deeper family issues, and my parents had a couple of years of turbulent marriage, which resulted eventually in my parents' divorce. And after a time, my father started to live with some family friends in the area, and he felt the burden of living with someone else other than his family. He struggled to find a job, and there were many other factors that led to his eventual homelessness. Well, in middle school, I remember one summer that I would go to visit my father, and we'd meet up at a coffee shop or a restaurant in town because he didn't have a house for us to go to see him. And he would go live in the Red Cross shelter, the Salvation Army homeless shelter, and spend the nights there until it got a little too dangerous for him. He recounted a story in which there was some fight at the homeless shelter, and it was a night he decided that he would never return to the homeless shelter again. So he went out and bought himself a tent and went out into the national park areas here in Colorado where we lived, and found a little campsite and pitched a tent and lived in the tent for a summer. There were a couple of Sundays weekends where I'd go to visit my father, and we'd hike out into the mountains and find his tent, his little campground. And we'd sing songs by the campfire. We'd roast marshmallows and hot dogs, and just spend some quality time together as a family. I never really thought it was too weird. I was just going to go visit my father. And it seemed like a normal visit, a normal thing for me to do at that age. I just wanted to be with him. Well, as I got into high school, I started my confirmation process at the church. And I began in this confirmation process to ask more serious questions, more demanding questions around faith and justice, equality, and what it means to be broken, to experience brokenness in the world. Part of our experience in confirmation was to do what was called a urban plunge, which is where our youth group would go to the Justice and Peace Commission in our town, and they would take us for an overnight trip to go visit all the services that attend to those who are homeless or those who are in poverty. So we got to visit a soup kitchen, we got to go visit a homeless shelter, we got to go visit some of the other nonprofit agencies that hand out food and sustenance. We rode the bus around town. We got to kind of walk in the footsteps and get to understand what it meant to be homeless in that city. Unbeknownst to many of my fellow confirmand students, it was an experience that I was all too familiar with. And as I walked the streets, I was taken to places that I did not want to go, places that I did not want to be. To walk in the homeless shelter was to remind me of my father's complex past of living as a homeless person. To be offered soup and food at the soup kitchen was to be reminded of going there with my father and sitting at the table and visiting about how homework was and what the activities in school were like. Children, go where I send thee. I'm going to send you to places of brokenness and show you what love really means. The places that I went to during my confirmation urban plunge were places that broke open for me, places of deep woundedness and pain and grief, stuff that I didn't fully comprehend as a child. But while I was there, I was able to confront some of these ghosts of the past, some of the pain that I experienced as a child. I was able to talk about some of my experiences with my adult leaders who led me into those places and to say, oh yeah, I've been to the soup kitchen before. Oh yeah, I've been to the homeless shelter. Oh yeah, I know what it's like to go to the tent camp where the homeless are staying. Because my father has been there. It was a place of shock for my adult leaders to realize the full depth of my experience as a child. And I saw as they wrestled with how do you talk to a kid who's experienced this at a young age and to put it into context. But the beauty of it all was that I didn't need someone to help translate my own painful experience for me, to help me find a place of healing. Going to those places allowed me to confront the darkness, to confront the shame, to confront the hardship and the brokenness. In fact, looking back on it now, I would say that I even needed to go to those places so that I could begin my own healing. And after years of reflection and study, I would say that it was God who led me to those places. Because it is God who has led me here today to stand in front of you, an ordained minister of the Word and Sacrament of the ministry of Jesus Christ. Without being able to confront those hardships and those painful experiences, I wouldn't have the courage to talk about the injustice of the world, to talk about systems that need to be in place for all people who struggle with homelessness, with hunger, with feeling alone in the world. But to even go further and talk about broken family systems that lead to conflicts in family, to lead to divorce and estrangement, that lead to lovelessness. It's taken the totality of my life, to reflect back and look at these experiences and to say with absolute certainty that God sent me where I needed to go. This is a season of reflection, and the song, "Children, Go Where I Send Thee," our response is, "How shall I send thee?" What is God saying to you this season? Where is God sending you? What are those places of brokenness, those places that you would much rather not go, that God is leading you to go? But it's not just about where we go, it is about how we go. Our response is, how shall I send thee? Not where should I send thee, but how shall I send thee? It's a reminder to me that God does not send us alone. In our spiritual, we sing these various verses, and we start with the 12 apostles. God doesn't send us by ourselves, but God sends us with the ancestors. The 12 apostles are those who guided the faith in its early stages and helped guide the church in this day and age. We look to these saints of the ancient faith to give us wisdom, to translate and interpret the scriptures for us, to help us feel what it is to live out this complex Christianity that we claim to follow. The next one is 11 for the 11. And these are the disciples, the 11 disciples who go to heaven. Excludes Judas Iscariot, who the reasoning goes betrayed Jesus and did not go to heaven. These are the 12 who follow Jesus, and the 11 who lay a place for us when we finally come to the very end of things and find ourselves in the grace and the love and the mercy of God. 10 for the 10 Commandments, the rules and the guidelines that help us navigate this tricky world. 9 for the 9 dressed so fine. I read something about this, and I can't remember what it was about, but 8 for the 8 that stood at the gate, 7 for the 7 that never got to heaven, 6 for the 6 that never got fixed, 5 for the gospel preachers, 4 for the 4 that stood at the door. That talks about the 4 gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. 3 for the Hebrew children, 2 for Paul and Silas, and 1 for the little bitty baby, born in Bethlehem. All of these talk about the characters that guide us in our faith. It says to me that we are never alone in this faith that we walk. When we get to 3 for the Hebrew children, one of the interesting things that I read about as I was doing research on this spiritual is that it refers to the 3 characters in the book of Daniel who were thrown into a fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the 3 Hebrew children. For the African Americans, the people who were brought to this country and enslaved, this spiritual spoke powerfully to them because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were 3 Hebrew individuals that were falsely imprisoned for worshiping their God. They were thrown into a furnace, and yet God saved them anyway. It's powerful imagery that the African American slave population hung on to for a sense of hope. 2 for Paul and Silas. Paul and Silas were also characters who were imprisoned and were set free by the love of God. There's a scene in the Christian scriptures in which Paul is in prison and they are freed from prison. This wind of the Holy Spirit shakes the prison walls down, and Paul and Silas are set free, the shackles broken from the walls. This imagery allowed those who were imprisoned during slavery, during the antebellum in this country, to envision a future in which they too would be set free. And it's all done in the spirit of community, and not by themselves. Children, go where I send thee. I'm going to send you with the one little tiny child who's born in Bethlehem to lead you and guide you all the days of your lives so that you do not get lost, so that you know where you are going. Mary and Joseph were sent to go to Bethlehem to give birth to Jesus. Probably not a place that they wanted to go, but a place that they needed to go to. For Joseph, we don't know the full context of his family history, but returning home probably brought up some of the complex emotions that Joseph felt. For him to be registered and to abide by the census meant that he had to confront his family's past and history and to allow it to move them into the future. In the book Mary Had a Baby, a book that illustrates for us some of the spirituals that we are learning this Christmas, the authors write that as we celebrate Advent and the creative imagination of those who produce the spiritual "Children, go where I send thee," let us remember all the babies born in inappropriate places, under inappropriate circumstances in the 21st century. God calls us to serve families in homeless shelters and displacement camps. People who are between countries and borders because of war or political status may seek the relative safety of a refugee camp. In 2012, the average population of a refugee camp was 11,400 people. Know that there are children in those camps. Depending on the host country, in order to discourage permanent settlement, sometimes schools are not even allowed. Camps are wretched places with open latrines and tents where children are at a high risk for disease, malnutrition, abuse, neglect, exploitation, and forced military recruitment, depending on the situation. This Advent, let us remember that just as Joseph and Mary had to go to Bethlehem in order to obtain appropriate documentation for residence in the Roman Empire, lack of documentation is problematic even in the 21st century. Homeless parents have no addresses. This makes it difficult to apply for jobs or to receive benefits that might help them in their situation. Immigration laws, poverty, and environmental disasters create orphans whose needs often fall through the safety nets. By the power of the Holy Spirit, we are equipped to care for the widows and the orphans in their distress. We have the power to make the difference in their lives. So let us live and work together, one by one, 10 by 10, hundreds by hundreds, to live out the message that was born in a baby, born in a manger, born in Bethlehem. God leads us to those dark places sometimes where we do not want to go in order to show us a light that will light up the world for us and show us our path forward. The good news is that my situation, my family's experience with my father's homelessness, did not end in tragedy and hopelessness. My father, through support of the church community and through the support of safety nets in our federal government, was able to find a place to live and to have money to adequately feed himself, take care of his health needs. And for that, I am eternally grateful. The support that I, as a middle schooler, was not able to offer, and I, as a high schooler, asking tough questions during our urban plunge, wasn't able to get to the heart of. And now, as a minister of the gospel, I work diligently to make sure that all people, whatever their life situation, have the resources necessary to live the life that God has called them, to not be ignored and not to slip through the cracks. It is hard and diligent work, but it is work that I don't do alone. It is work that I do with the 12 apostles, with the disciples, with the gospel writers, with the 3 Hebrew children, with Paul and Silas, and with a baby born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I am going to send you with courage this day. Courage to face the hardships in life, courage to do the hard things, courage to stand up, to say, here I am. Go. Send me where you may, God. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I'm going to send you with the peace of Christ in your hearts, a peace that is not just for you, but for all nations, to share and send and lift up God's holy word and God's holy light. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I'm going to send you with the love of a child who is born out of distress and hardship, but who will light the world and for all nations, for you as a beacon of light and hope. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
Children, I will send you with the hope of the world, a hope that will go with you all the days of your life, a hope that will not diminish, but will brighten with every step of the journey. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I am going to send you with joy, because that is the ultimate expression of living a life filled with awe and wonder, of a God filled with hope. I'm going to send you with hearts bursting at the seams for a child born in a lowly manger, that you may know that wherever you are sent, it is where you are meant to go, and there is much work to be done in the journey. Amen.
Amen.
Let us turn to singing, Children, Go Where I Send Thee.
And your song response will be, how shall I send thee? Try it. How shall I send thee? So Beth and Karen are going to help. This side will be odd, so you'll take 1, 3, 5. This side will be evens, 2, 4. And then we'll all sing, born, born, born in Bethlehem. Try it. Born, born, born in Bethlehem. Children, children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm going to send thee one by one.
One for the little bitty baby.
Born, born, born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm going to send thee 2 by 2.
2 for Paul and Silas. 1 for the little bitty baby.
Born, born, born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm going to send thee 3 by 3.
3 for the Hebrew children. 2 for Paul and Silas. 1 for the little bitty baby.
Who was born, born, born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm going to send thee 4 by 4.
4 for the 4 that stood at the door. 3 for the Hebrew children. 2 for Paul and Silas. 1 for the little bitty baby.
Who was born, born, born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm going to send thee 5 by 5.
5 for the gospel preachers. 4 for the 4 that stood at the door. 3 for the Hebrew children. 2 for Paul and Silas. 1 for the little bitty baby.
Was born, born, born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm going to send thee 6 by 6.
6 for the 6 that never got fixed. 5 for the gospel preachers. 4 for the 4 that stood at the door. 3 for the Hebrew
was born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I'm gonna send thee 7 to 7.
7 for the 7 that never got to heaven. 6 for the 6 that never got fixed. 5 for the gospel preachers. 4 for the 4 that stood at the door. 3 for the Hebrew children. 2 for Paul and Silas. 1 for the little bitty baby.
Born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I'm gonna send thee 8 by 8.
8 for the 8 that stood at the gate. 7 for the 7 that never got to heaven. 6 for the 6 that never got fixed. 5 for the gospel preachers. 4 for the 4 that stood at the door. 3 for the Hebrew children. 2 for Paul and Silas. 1 for the little bitty baby.
Was born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I'm gonna send thee 9 by 9.
9 for the 9 all dressed so fine. 8 for the 8 that stood at the gate. 7 for the 7 that never got to heaven. 6 for the 6 that never got fixed. 5 for the gospel preachers. 4 for the 4 that stood at the door. 3 for the Hebrew children. 2 for Paul and Silas. 1 for the little bitty baby.
Born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I'm gonna send thee 10 by 10.
10 for the 10 commandments. 9 for the 9 all dressed so fine. 8 for the 8 that stood at the gate. 7 for the 7 that never got to heaven. 6 for the 6 that never got fixed. 5 for the gospel preachers. 4 for the 4 that stood at the door. 3 for the Hebrew children. 2 for Paul and Silas. 1 for the little bitty baby. Was
Born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I'm gonna send thee 11 by 11.
11 for the 11 bitty riders. 10 for the 10 commandments. 9 for the 9 all dressed so fine. 8 for the 8 that stood at the gate. 7 for the 7 that never got to heaven. 6 for the 6 that never got fixed. 5 for the gospel preachers. 4 for the 4 that stood at the door. 3 for the Hebrew children. 2 for Paul and Silas. 1 for the little bitty baby.
Born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee.
How shall I send thee?
I'm gonna send thee 12 by 12.
12 for 12 apostles. 11 for the 11 riders. 10 for the 10 commandments. 9 for the 9 all dressed so fine. 8 for the 8 that stood at the gate.